Hi, I'm Gail.
And hi, I'm Catherine. Welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, our award-winning weekly podcast. Please visit womenover70.com, consider membership in our Aging Reimagined circle, become a sponsor, and do mark your calendar now to attend our symposium in the Chicago area on October 19th, 2024. Please join us in continuing to inspire women to age with curiosity, courage, and creativity.
And we're pleased to welcome today Annamarie Pluhar. Annamarie just turned 70 and was eager to be on Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined. She lives in the southeast corner of Vermont. Annamarie spends all her energy on making sure people are not chronically isolated. She wants to normalize living together. Annamarie became an expert and advocate on sharing housing through personal experience, combined with expertise in group process and dynamics. A facilitator and training professional, she has worked with clients in Fortune 100 firms as well as nonprofits. Having lost her partner last August and living alone for the first time, Annamarie is doubling her efforts to let people know that housemates are not the same as roommates, and living together as housemates has many benefits. Annamarie wrote her first book on this subject and published it in 2011. The book, Shared Housing, a guidebook for finding and keeping good housemates. Her nonprofit is Sharing Housing, Inc., where she currently serves as president. So, Annamarie, welcome to Women Over 70. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Good. It seems like you were an early adopter to this lifestyle of living with housemates.
Or maybe I was like everybody in my generation, but I never, quote, grew out of it. Because it's true. I mean, that's part of what happened is that I lived in shared housing in college. Mm-hmm. I lived after college, after graduate school. In fact, I convinced two friends who were spending money on apartments living by themselves, I convinced them to move in with me. And we moved into an apartment that was a 4-bedroom apartment in Somerville, Mass. Mm-hmm. And I loved that apartment. They didn't love each other and they both moved out, but I continued to live in that apartment for 8 years. Mm-hmm. And had a slew of we always had 3 roommates, mm-hmm. housemates. I correct myself because I think roommate is a word that is good for camp and college and maybe even conferences, where you actually share a room. But adults don't want to have roommates. The adults should have housemates. So I lived there for 8 years. I finally left that apartment and bought the Boston area for a relationship. I moved to Washington, D.C. When that relationship broke up, I went and lived with a single mom and her 4-year-old son, somebody I knew kind of through the community. Mm-hmm. And then when her boyfriend came back from spending a year overseas, I was like, it's time to move. What am I going to do now? And unlike many people, I was very clear that I did not want to live alone. Mm-hmm. I was just, why spend all that money? I just didn't want to do it. And so I got the idea, I buy the house. I get the housemate. So I bought a 4-bedroom house in Silver Spring, Maryland, mm-hmm. and a true fixer-upper. And lived there 10 years and had housemates, had 2. So there were always 3 of us, 2 housemates. We always had a guest room. And while I was in that house, a friend of mine was complaining about her finances. And I said, well, you have an asset, is it? She said, what are you talking about? I said, rent a room in your house. And I wish I was the actress to get the tone of her voice because she was like, I don't know how to do that. And I did something like, well, I do. And she was like, oh, yeah, you do. Will you coach me? And that caught me a little thing in my head. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I went looking around for whether anybody was doing anything like that, and I didn't see anything. And the next day, I was on a bus from Silver Spring, Maryland to New York City, and I pulled out my laptop and I did a 2-hour brain dump, and I wrote an outline for the book. It sat on the computer. And I'm kind of telling this story because listeners probably also have things which they experience that there's like, should I do that, not do that? It sat on the computer. I left the area around Washington. I moved to Vermont. 2 years, at least 2 years after I had moved to Vermont, one morning I was walking from the bed to the bathroom, and this little voice in my head said, "Are you ever going to do that project?" And I was like, ooh. And I started thinking about it, and I realized that if I didn't, it was going to be a deathbed regret. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that project. And some other things happened kind of that week that I had an accountability group. All of a sudden, two friends said, I'm writing books, and we put together an accountability group. And that's how my book got written. We met once a week. We critiqued each other's work. It took me 3 years to get it done, but I got it done. And then the book came out in 2011. And ever since then, it's been kind of an exploration for, okay, how am I supposed to do this? What am I supposed to do? It was 2017. I was at a big conference, the American Society on Aging, their annual conference. And I was presenting, but then I went off to another little something and whatever. And I was like, this really is a nonprofit mission.
So
I need to do a nonprofit.
You talked about studying group dynamics.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. How'd you get into that, and what do you do?
By accident. I have a master's in Divinity, which is a 3-year training in how to become a minister, and it's theological studies, and that's a whole accident of a story. But part of the training is working in groups. And I had 2 summer sessions of what we called clinical pastoral education, which was a 6 weeks intensive hospital chaplaincy training with small group supervision. So that was my initial experience of small groups. Oh, I guess we had them also in the seminary. And then after I graduated and did not get ordained, and very happily not ordained, I went to work for a management consulting company where what my job was facilitating groups of self-employed teams to help them solve problems in their organizations. So I got a lot of experience through that. And I just naturally see these dynamics about how do groups form and how do they manage themselves.
Annamarie, do you have criteria that you use in selecting your housemates?
I don't, but I teach people how to have their own criteria. Because what I say is that people can have a home-mate, which for me means that somebody they like and respect, which are really important, and I don't have a prescription for how do you know whether you like somebody, but from there, whose ways of living at home are compatible enough that everybody is comfortable. And what my experience is that it's the nitty-gritties of how you live in your house that make or break a home-mate relationship. Whether it's, how clean do you keep your kitchen? Do you mind if the kitchen floor gets dirty or not? Where dust bunnies, noise guests, that's the sort of thing I teach people to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. So it's how you live first and want to live.
Absolutely very important.
Yeah.
And then what are your, what for you, what's your ideal in terms of the kind of relationship, or how you relate as homemates or housemates? Are you?
For me, my ideal, and everybody is different. So what I really want listeners to hear is that it's up to you how you want to live. Some people want to have lodgers, past ships in the night, completely independent living. Some people really want somebody they're going to have dinner with every single night. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's up to you. My choice is to have what I call a convivial relationship, friendly, warm, occasional shared meals, but independent lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And go back to the group dynamics for a minute.
Sure.
I'm curious to know, what are some of the tenets that you saw or that you've learned that make a difference in a group that works and a group that doesn't?
A group that works has to have an ability to have communication about what is and isn't working. So I say that there are 4 principles for living well with housemates, and there you just heard the 4-legged one. So my first principle is the golden rule. Okay, so you have to be able to be willing to adapt and adjust, because you've already taken care of the big stuff. You haven't agreed. If in agreeing to live together, you've said, yes, we are incompatible enough. So then it's the golden rule combined with being willing to say, that didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Combined with your room is always your own. Or that's your private space. I mean, people say to me, I could never live in shared housing. I need my privacy. Well, you can have privacy if you have a door that you can close that's yours. Mm-hmm. So I'm coming back to group dynamics. I'm getting there. Because at that point, if you have those principles in place, one of the good things that can happen for a group is to have a regular place, a time, agreed upon time and place. And sometimes it's a meal once a week where, how's it going? Mm-hmm. What works for you? What didn't work for you? So that you can have a conversation about it. You're assuming that everybody wants it to work, right? So you want to have some communication about what's working, what's not working for each other. Does this make sense? Am I answering your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what if you find that it's just not working? Have you had the experience where you've had to ask someone to leave?
Unfortunately, and I will tell you that the only time that I have had that problem was when I felt desperate to get somebody moved in because I needed the money. That's when people make mistakes. If it's not working for both of you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in my book, what I say in that chapter, it's the first line is, it's not working when you don't want to go home. Seriously. And I know that a lot of people are very afraid of having the wrong person move in, or having a bad situation, to which I say, why did you let that person move in? Because it is still true. Someday I may hear a story, but so far I haven't, that every bad housemate situation I've ever heard of comes about through an incomplete, inefficient, or non-existent selection process. You have to be willing to do the selection process and to interview and talk and get clear and go through what are your must-haves, what are your can't live with. If your must-haves and your can't live with don't match, you can't live together, period. So I'm currently, you mentioned that my partner died last summer. I am just beginning to start putting out the word that I'm looking for a housemate. And I posted it on my Facebook page. And one of my requirements my must-haves is I need to have somebody who's going to be willing to look after my dog and my cat if I need to be away. That's a must-have for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm kind of hoping I have a housemate who will bring another four-legged into the house and that we'll have a shared understanding of that kind of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I have a question. I know younger people, college-age people, often have roommates of different genders.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, how do you feel about that as an adult, as a 70-year-old?
Absolutely. And in fact, so I said I have 4 principles for shared housing, and I've only told you 3.
Right.
My 4th is the incest taboo. And this actually comes to me courtesy of my friend and long-term housemate, Chris, when he interviewed with me in that house in the Boston area. And at the end of it, he kind of said, and we have an incest taboo, right? And I went, yeah, I guess so. It was so helpful because we got really close. We knew a lot about each other's families.
Mm-hmm.
We talked for hours. We were both single in our 30s. It would have been confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you clearly state that you have this incest taboo because you're family, you're living under a roof together,
Mm-hmm.
then actually for a lot of women, having a good guy around, can be fabulous because they use homes differently.
Mm-hmm.
And they're willing to do episodic work and et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've had guys say, I want a wife. And I'm go, oh, no. So you have to get clear about what that story is. But I am actually all for, living with people of the gender that you would be attracted to. This is sad to say it that way.
And how about bringing, romantic involvement into the house as the individuals bringing romantic involvement into the house? How do you
So that's one of the things people talk about in my categories of things is the guests who spend the night.
Uh-huh.
So up front, before you agree to live together, what are your standards?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in my book, I had a woman who I interviewed, and she's had housemates. She lives near Harvard, and she originally had a housemate to help with young children, but she kept it up over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And what she said to me is that it was very clear. The 3rd time somebody other spent the night in her house, she sat the couple down and said, what are you up to? And at which point they'd spend more time at his house. She usually had a woman. So I think that that's also part of it. Or I once heard a woman who lived with 2 other women. They bought a house together, get asked this question in a conference. And she looked at us all and went, isn't that what hotels are for?
Yeah. So it's shared understanding that is
Absolutely
what's at the bottom of making it successful.
Sure, because this 3rd person or 4th person, whatever, this person who starts being in the house as a lover of a housemate becomes a housemate.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a conversation. And it may be fine. You may like the person, but, then they should chip in. Meals, heating, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it needs to be, you got to have open communication.
So you bring up another good point, and that is about the finances. How do you work that? How do you suggest we work that out?
So the way I talk about this is there's the householder, and then there's the home seeker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether the householder is actually the homeowner or has the lease. Usually that's the setup. Now, if 2 people are agreeing to go rent someplace together, then they have a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what I suggest is that the householder sit down and figure out what the house is costing per year. Because I once had somebody say she forgot to think about the heat when she rented in the summer.
Oh.
And then look at what that is divided by 12. And then look at what the current market value is locally. And figure out a price that is reasonable. Don't get greedy. Because you want your housemate to feel like they're getting a good deal. And so that there's a clear understanding of what the cost of the rental is, how it's going to be paid. You don't nickel and dime all the little electricity bills and all of that kind of stuff. You just have a lump sum. And these days you can put it on autopilot and have money be cleaned. You should never end up in a place where somebody owes somebody money, because then things get wonky.
Right. Yeah.
And I think part of the dynamics, part of the conversation too is about household chores, yard work, repairs.
All of that.
Yeah, all of that.
All of that. Now, one of the fun things about having shared housing is because there's more income. Sometimes it's easier to hire people to do these jobs that you wouldn't otherwise, that you would be doing on your own.
Sure. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So you, it sounds like you would always choose to have a housemate rather than to live alone.
Pretty much. I mean, I've had this experience now. Bob died at the beginning of August. And now it's March. I can see how people can settle into living by themselves. I get it. I mean, I look at the kitchen and go, oh, I'm the only person who's going to deal with this. I'll look at it in the morning and stuff like that. On the other hand, I can spend an entire weekend. No, I can't anymore. But it's possible to spend days without talking to anybody. And that's not good. It's not good for us. It's really not good for us. I have a friend who lived by herself in a small town nearby, and her memory was going. She's in her 80s. Her memory was going, and she would say, oh, my memory is so bad. Well, because of Bob's death, I lost track for a while and found out that her family had moved her into a very lovely assisted living kind of place we have here, a redone mansion. And she got in touch with me, and I went to visit her. Her memory is better. She has daily interaction with people. She can go downstairs. They have people checking on her. I can tell that she is better than she was when she was living by herself.
Yeah.
And that's part of my plea with people, that they take on this idea of shared housing. It's not fun. It's not easy. It's transition. It's moving. It's all of the stuff we don't like to do. But I think it can make all the difference.
So now that you're in your 70s, in this decade, right? What concerns do you have? And maybe there are some things you'd like to tell our younger listeners about that they should think about as they move ahead in their lives.
Yeah. So I'm still feeling like a young 70, and I can see, I mean, this part of where I live, I'm always one of the younger people because it's just, we are one of the oldest states in the country and all of that kind of stuff. What the things that concern me are that people start thinking about shared housing when it's already too late, when they need caretaking.
Yeah.
And I have people call me and I go, this is not the right thing for you now, because you can't get a housemate to be a caretaker. Sometimes I've heard stories about people where they do that, but I can't recommend it. I can't say that happens and all of that. On the other hand, if you have developed a home-mate relationship in your 60s and you carry it into your 70s and into your 80s, then there's going to be a natural ability, a desire to help, because it's who we are as human beings until you can't anymore. And then people need to make other decisions.
Yeah. And so how are you thinking about you as you move forward?
I'm just beginning to go, oh, it's me. I am. Quite honestly, I'm just like the shock of losing my partner 23 years. I'm still grieving. I'm still crying at night. I can cry right now. So I'm just like going, oh, and I kind of have a hope, a little vision hope. What I'd love to see get built are apartments, accessible, et cetera, that have 4 master bedroom suites for 3 people. So that one can be for guests and or a caretaker if necessary. And 3 people who all have their private space, their private bathroom, and a common kitchen and a common living room. That's what I want to live in my 80s. Now, whether I figure out how to convince people around here to build it, that's another story. But that's really my ideal.
Well, I think you're probably not alone in that.
Right.
And that it's something that's very realistic and is perhaps happening in other parts of the country. So I think that's your next project.
Along with the current project of convincing more people. So I coach people. I teach people. I have a Zoom class that's actually starting in April. I used to do this when I had to convince people that Zoom was easy. And it's teaching people the basics about what the selection process is. And it's interactive so that people could talk to each other. And on our website, I have an online class. I'm calling it class because it's 30 minutes in length, called 5 Key Benefits of Shared Housing, which is free for people. The website is sharinghousing.com. And, it's really kind of interesting to try to think about this. It doesn't fall into categories easily. Our local congresswoman is a woman named Becca Baylett. She's wonderful. And she's going to be doing a big talk about the housing bill she's putting through. And I know she's thinking bricks and mortar. And I haven't yet gone, knock, knock. Can you think about shared housing? But I'm trying.
Yeah, good. Get out there. Not on a door.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Well, Annamarie, this was wonderful.
I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
We thank you very much for being.
Yes. And listeners, because of your loyalty, our numbers continue to grow. Still, we need your support. Visit womenover70.com, join Aging Reimagined Circle, or make a donation, and let your voice be heard and help change the conversation about women aging.